Good evening, everyone. My name is Shenton Sung from Grander Together, and on behalf of my organization, I'd like to say good evening and welcome to this another interesting, apparently webinar that we have organized for you. Thank you so much for coming in. Allow me to say a little bit before we have our speakers to uh, to educate us in their own way. So today's topic is very relevant because Grander Together organizes these webinars as a series of panel discussions between people across generations. So they bring their professional or personal perspectives to help strengthen intergenerational families. Tonight's webinar has also been brought to you in partnership with Family Enrichment Society, the East Asian Education Limited, and Golden Years. We're also very happy to have the partnership of Mums for Life, Dads for Life, and SG Families. Tonight, we have a panel of two very wonderful speakers. First of all, there's John Uy. John has experienced a lifetime of work in the arena of education, 40 years of marriage, and he now has six adult children. He understands life's transitions, certainly. And as a 67-year-old grandfather, John will share an approach that he has used personally to find new purpose in his senior years. Our second panelist tonight, who will actually speak first, is Abdul Hamid bin Abdullah. Now, Hamid is a 70-year-old retired audit director, living his golden age with dignity, independence, and supportive network of friends. He contributes very much in charitable causes and is committed to adding healthy years to his life. So Hamid is also a golden age lifestyle coach, and tonight he will again strongly advocate a meaningful and purposeful life beyond 70. So as we kick off, may I just stop sharing first and allow Hamid, let me just spotlight Hamid. Hamid, the stage is yours. Thank you for joining us, Hamid. Over to you.
Let me begin by saying that we should appreciate growing old. Aging is a privilege. You all agree? It is a privilege. Why is aging a privilege? Because it provides us with an accumulation of knowledge and wisdom throughout the years, throughout the various stages of life. We have experienced many things where we were able to contribute and share to other people regarding how to live meaningfully and purposefully. I always advocate that to live meaningfully or to age, all right, with grace. I call it aging gracefully. I have actually a framework. And that framework which I advocate is called the PHWR framework. That is comprised of P stands for purpose. You want a purposeful living. H is health. W is wealth. R is relationship. So there are four domains. What I'm going to cover in today's brief talk, is to look at the domain of purpose. Now, we must understand what is your purpose of life. Life must be purposeful. That it must be meaningful for us to stay alive. But have you ever asked this question? Why should I live longer? Why should I be happy to live long? That's the fundamental questions that we should always ask. And in the senior years, this become more significant. All right. What is your priorities in your senior years within each of these determine? Purpose, health, wealth, and relationship. So in the realm of purpose, we have to ask this fundamental question. What is the reason for me, for my living? Why am I living for? Where am I heading to? How do I monitor progress in life? Now, these are the key questions. The important thing to note is that aging gracefully is a balancing act between the four domains of purpose, health, wealth, and relationship. So let me go through by understanding that ultimately the desired outcome is to have a happy life. How to be happy? We have to manage these four domains properly: purpose, health, wealth, and relationship. Now, what is the importance of having clarity in life's purpose? We must be clear about our life's purpose before we go to a discussion. In fact, my colleague will explain to you an approach how to determine purpose. You have to understand the importance of having clarity in life. To me, there are five aspects. Firstly, it is a source of inspiration, a source of inspiration. It provides direction in life, a moral compass. It is a driving force. Having a purpose will help us to determine the priorities in life. So we must have purposeful living, or what we call a purpose driven life. Now, without a purpose, you would find that life to some will be meaningful. I am a grassroots leader. I serve as a grassroots leader in Bedok, and I'm aware of many seniors in that Bedok constituency who are living lonely, in loneliness, all right? And there are people who are living in depression, and there are people who are asking, I don't want to live long. All right. Now, it is a sad thing because they do not find any more meaning in life. And that is why they have come to a state where they feel depressed. And they are in search. What am I living for? But yet, for those others, people who have clarity in the purpose of life, no matter what state they are in, they would continue to enjoy living. They will continue to be happy because they need to have a purpose to fulfill in life. So, what is that life's purpose? What is that life's purpose are we talking about? There are two perspectives, in my opinion. One is the secular worldview. Second perspective is what I call the non-secular or the religious worldview. Well, in my opinion, these two should be integrated. The moment a person only adopts a secular view of things or the secular view of life, they would find it a sense of emptiness. The purpose is not fulfilling because of the what I should call the state of mind. Okay, our actions actually are all manifested by our worldview of things, how we do view things. For instance, if you take a secular view of the environment, the trees, the greenery, all right, you will just look that as a means of fulfilling certain economic benefits. We are going to cut the trees, we are going to have trunk, we are going to have log. By having trees, we were able to make villages and so forth. All right. Now, if you adopt a non-secular view or a religious view, you will look at the same thing, the trees, all right, things. But from a different perspective, you will look this as part of nature, of which you are also a part of it, and therefore the need to live harmoniously with nature. You look at the tree as a seed that will provide you with sustainability and so forth. Now, I'm not going into deeper discussion on this life purpose, just to give you an idea that there is basically two perspectives. Now, let me end just to share with you my own personal story. What is my life purpose? All right, this is my personal story. You may not adopt the same view depending on how you look at your own purpose of life. So there are four things that I would like to share. My life's purpose is to serve God. So I am a believer in God. So it is faith driven. Now, we will not go into discussion into why this is the purpose of my life, because I find through these beliefs, I'm fully aware of who am I, what am I living for, why I'm born into this world, all right, where am I heading for, and so forth. It answers all those fundamental questions which I believe we need to be able to answer them in your own from your own perspective. Having a purpose, I said for you, the importance is that with a purpose, I will be able to align all the activities in my life to the purpose of my life. I'm able to determine the priorities. What comes first, what I should do first, and what priority should I give it. In other words, the purpose actually provides me with a guide. It guides my journey in life. It provides me the reason for living. Now, what do I do in my senior years? I can share you a lot, all right? And you may say, is that your purpose? I love traveling. Seniors, I would encourage you to travel because the whole world is a book. All right, traveling. But if you do not align it with the purpose of life, let me ask you this question. What is the purpose of traveling? Why are you traveling? Now, I travel because I want to learn. Learn about the world, learn about the countries, the culture, the people, and so forth. It is aligned to the purpose because all what I around this world, they are what I call creations. They are God's creation, in which I am just one of them. So I'm able to relate. Now I do a lot of community service, adopt charitable causes involved in charities work, and so forth. Again, this idea of providing community service is aligned to the purpose of my life. I don't serve for the sake of serve. I serve because it is in alignment with my life purpose. Another thing which I do in my senior years, which I see some of you are also doing, is teaching. Teach. Teach others. You share knowledge and experience and skills. You volunteer. Now, in summary, is that what we do in our seniors, in my opinion, should help to fulfill life's purpose. Otherwise, it is not a meaningful act as I see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamid. Those were very wonderful, thought-provoking sharings that you've had. I had a few takeaways for which I'll probably have some questions for you, Hamid. So some wonderful
Yes.
ideas around being a source of inspiration, how we address loneliness, and the fact that we're all part of an ecosystem of creation gives us purpose. And I also like your idea about how traveling to learn creates or gives you that purpose. And after all that traveling, all the knowledge gain, there's also a possibility of teaching and transferring that knowledge to someone who may not have that privilege of traveling as much. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Hamid. For the rest of our participants in the room, just to remind you that you are free to type in your questions in the Q&A box, and our panelists, Hamid and John, will come to you with the answers, which I will moderate the Q&A session later. So thank you once again, Hamid. Our next speaker is John. So John, over to you. Share with us about purposeful living in the senior years. Thank you, John. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chanton. I'll share some slides because yeah, I'll focus the thinking. Just yeah. Okay, are you able to see my slide?
Yes, I can. Go
Can,
ahead,
huh?
John.
Good. All right. Okay, thanks, Hamid, for starting it off and giving us a sense of the importance of why we need purpose, right? I remember when I was quite young, I read this book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, right? And he had a very interesting story that struck me. Viktor Frankl was a Jew and he was thrown into the Nazi concentration camp, right? And he noticed that when Hitler brought all the people to the Nazi concentration camp, there were some prisoners that were big, strong, and healthy and very strong looking, and you would think that they would be the ones who would survive the horrors of the camp, right? And there were others who were, well, more weak looking, and at first glance you think that, yeah, they'll die very fast. Okay, but he had a very interesting observation, right? After a while, the strength that they had seemed to not matter very much, and the survivors he found or he observed were the ones who had a reason to live, a reason to survive, right? Maybe to go, they were wanted to see their loved ones, or maybe there's something they're yet to do, and so on, right? So he came out this his study, and he is a psychologist, and he said anyone, the person who has a why to live for, can bear with almost any how. Okay? So this thing that I mentioned, this purpose of life, why am I alive? What is my life all about? Is what psychologists call the existential vacuum, right? So when we don't have purpose, then there is a certain sense of emptiness, you know, there's a certain like, yeah, when I get up in the morning, why do I want to get up, right? What's it all about? So I just want to plant the thought that when we retire into our senior years, in the past few decades, we've all had a fairly clear objective. Well, for many of us, the reason for our living would be to earn enough to support our family and bring them up and so on, right? But when we retire and our children are all grown up, there can be a vacuum and we lose our sense of direction, right? As Hamid has shared. So one key idea is we don't want to have this existential vacuum. And so my sharing will be more on how we might go about finding for ourselves a meaningful life again. Now, if you read the literature, you could say that there are three main ways in which we can find meaning, right? The first one is what we give, what we contribute to others, right? And you can call that creative values. So the help we give to others, the work we do, and so on, right? But there are also two other categories. One is just taking in the beauty of the world around us. So Hamid shared quite a bit about travel, all right? Others will enjoy painting, music, and so on. So, and that is what gives meaning to their lives. So that's all right. That's the experience of what life has to offer. But there's a third category that can give meaning, which is the stance we take when facing unavoidable suffering or challenge, right? So for example, I have a friend whose wife had dementia, and whose daughter, his only child, was a special needs child, right? That needs very careful looking after. So actually he is now in his 70s, his wife just passed away. His whole past decade or two was really just looking after his family, no opportunity, no time to just go out and enjoy life as many of the rest of us are fortunate enough to do, right? So for him, but when you talk to him, you really get inspired because he is very stoically and bravely just taking it all to support his loved ones. So three ways or three categories of meaning, right? Okay. Now, how does one go about finding meaning and purpose in one's life after retirement, which I suppose is the reason why you're attending our sharing today, right? But before I go into that question, I like to draw an analogy of business, right? If I were to say, I want to start a successful business, and if you are experienced in business, some basic questions you would throw at me would be, hey, you want to start business, but what is your product? What are you selling? Right? And if I'm not clear, you will shake your head and say, if you don't know what you're selling, how can you even run a successful business, right? But even if I could give you an idea, I'm thinking of doing this, the next question you throw at me would be, where will you find your customer? Who is your customer? If you're fuzzy about that, then you waste a lot of time and energy yeah, and in the end, your resources will all be gone. So in business, a key idea is what are you selling, what is your product, and who is your customer. Now, when it comes to our meaning and purpose in life, there is something analogous or similar, right? You've all been struggling through, through your earlier years, working and maybe promising yourself that you'll enjoy life when you retire, right? And now that you've entered it, you do have the time, and you're thinking of doing something. Well, probably you wouldn't want to do something you hate, right, or dislike. So actually, the starting point for finding fresh meaning would be to understand yourself, your interests, your strengths, in the areas that you want to contribute, right? That's the starting point. But as you explore and think, reflect on that, the other question would also be, who needs what you want to offer? Right? That's equivalent to the customer of a business. So what are the opportunities or the needs of others that I have observed whom I might be able to offer my services to or support, right? So this idea of knowing oneself, all right, I'll give you an example. Sometimes you have a fuzzy idea. I volunteer, do something meaningful. I volunteer, but volunteer to do what, right? So this slide that I've shared here all the 4 W's and 1 H. What do you want to volunteer in? Who do you want to serve? When? How often? Where? And so on, right? So when you have a clearer understanding of this, you can zoom in more on what you may potentially do in this stage of life. Now, I'd just like to share with you this idea of a purpose inventory, right? So earlier on, I talked a bit about the category or type: contribute, experience, grow. I shared a bit about understanding ourselves, what are our interests or strengths. And so when we look around us, who are the people who might need what we have to offer? Now, if you can fill in this table, right, you've got a sense of how you might go about developing fresh purpose at this stage of life. Okay. So just some examples to illustrate, right? For example, if you are looking at contributing, right, then you might, based on your experience, want to be a mentor, or you might take a leadership position in your neighborhood group, or you might volunteer. If you enjoy beauty, love, relationship, well, maybe there are many people who are happy just being a good grandparent to their children, all right, and that fulfills them, and that's all right for them. That's good enough. For others, they may want to help others enjoy nature, and then for growth, right? Hamid talked a bit about spiritual practices, and maybe even something is just like learning to be a better human being, being positive, and so on. So these are all possibilities that you can focus on. Now, it's also worth asking ourselves after today, when you go back, you might pick up some ideas. You might go back and say, yeah, I want to try this. But, we might end a lot of workshops that we've attended with good intentions, but after a few days, it just wears away, right? So it's also good to be aware of, you pick up some interesting ideas, but how do you translate that into action, right? Now, what are some of the things that may stop you from developing purpose in your senior years? Well, sometimes it is this loss of identity, and since I'm not very clear who I am now, I'm stuck, right? And and I don't act on it. I don't clarify for myself what is the new identity I want to develop. Or it could be that I tell myself, okay, I've been working so hard so many years, I just want to do nothing, right? And I feel this existential vacuum, but I'm kind of like, I lost that energy. Okay? or it can be that I have lost a structure in my daily routine, and every day I get up, but actually I don't know what to want to do in my time and so on. All right, so these are all possibilities. So what we need to do is actually to develop our own purpose statement, right? So when you write this out, it's something like a mission statement in all the businesses and companies and organizations we belong to, you know. When your mission is clear, it gives you mission focus. You don't drift, you don't go in all directions. You zoom in on what you want to do, right? So a purpose statement is for the individual, helping us to zoom in on what we may want to do in these senior years. So these are some examples. And for those who want templates and find it useful, this is something that I have used, right? I want to use my strength, skill, or interest to do something in this area so that I might something, right? So just to share with you for myself, I was in education all my working life, right? So I do training, education. I have an interest in living well, and right? And I discovered that actually many of my peers, many of you, after retiring, there is a bit of a gap and you're trying to figure out, you know, what you're going to do in this next stage. So in this stage of life, I've learned for myself that actually a number of issues that we need to learn to navigate. So when I write my purpose statement, it would come out looking something like this, all right? I want to use my background in education training, my interest in living well, to help persons navigate the issues they face in their seniors so that I might become the person that I want to be, right? So I'm serving others, but at the same time, I'm learning, I'm helping myself too. Hence, because of this, I'm doing stuff in this senior area, and hence I've been invited to share with you for tonight. Okay, now, so just share with you the idea of a purpose portfolio too. Basically, if you have your purpose statement done for you, you have a sense of what you want to do and who might benefit from it. You can, I mean, after today, you can probably start working on it. Just a reminder that, well, depending on your own interests, you may even have a purpose portfolio. That means you may choose to contribute in several areas. All right, it can be one, it can be several. Again, the beauty of being in this stage of life is that many things are our choice.
Thank you, John, very much for sharing your slides and for giving us some tools, some very practical tools of what we can literally do with just a paper and pencil to write down a purpose statement. I'd like to go into a Q&A session. So as both Hamid and John, when you were speaking, a few questions popped into my mind. Perhaps I can start with Hamid. Could you give us, say, an example of how you yourself had been an inspiration to someone, such that that someone and then went on to, I don't know, do something better? Give me an example, Hamid. I'm sure you have lots of examples of how you have inspired other people.
Thank you, Shanton. It's a very relevant question. As I was mentioning during my talk, that one of the things that I do is teaching. All right. By teaching, you're actually transferring knowledge, skills, and experience to others. So I always focus on youth development because they have the potential to help spread what is taught, they will teach others. Now, when we teach, we are not teaching just the subject matter. I focus more on growth and development. In other words, you teach in such a way you help that person to grow the leadership, to grow the ability to relate to others, the emotional intelligence. So teaching is not just talking about the hard subjects and the science, but I'm more focused on values in particular, as well as the need to create relationship, meaningful relationship with others. So these students of mine, they were very young. Not long ago, one of them was sitting on my lap, 12-year-old boy. Now, in Cambodia, because I had some of my most activities in Cambodia. That was 10 years ago. And I recently met with him. Of course, he's now 10 years older. So what do I do? So I asked him, how are you doing? And he acknowledged, no, sir, you are my source of inspiration. You do not only give food, but you actually teach me how to fish. In other words, you don't just give fish, but teach me how to fish so that I can be independent and so forth. I've really felt helpful, and I really sense this is the impact of what I do. Just a small service through teaching, and you will know that if you teach well, they will look at you not only as a teacher, but as a mentor, a coach, a guide, so and so forth.
Yes, and indeed, when you're teaching, you also have to be very sharp with your mind and to
Mm.
recall what you're trying to transfer the knowledge on. So it keeps your brain active. Thank you so much, Hamid.
Yes.
John, I was wondering if would you have an example of someone whom you had inspired or influenced in your senior years?
Well, I don't know if I inspired them, but I do engage in conversations with many others. And I suppose people, you know, when we enter our senior years, we think we can switch off, right? But actually, there are issues that we face which we should be aware of and which we've got to learn to navigate, right? So, purpose in life is one example. Loneliness, right? Starting to be cut off or disconnected from others, is another issue. Um, Learning to come to terms with the things that we've had, the broken relationships we've had, and how to patch it up would be yet another issue. So there actually are a number of issues that sometimes we are not very aware of. And as I, share with others at various events, I engage with others, and that interaction and sharing of perspectives, I find it very helpful, and I hope hopefully others also find it helpful.
Yes, I think that's a very wonderful thought, John, that in our senior years, if we reflect on any relationships that are broken, I guess this would be an opportune time to work at it, focus, and to reconcile. Yeah, I have one question perhaps for both Hamid and John, and that is in a previous webinar we had where we spoke about the mental health of seniors, it was said that a person identified himself or herself by the job and the job title that he or she had for 10, 20, 30 years. But upon retirement, suddenly that sense of identity is lost because there's no more office or a job title or a name card to hold. Could I ask each of you, how do you trans translate from that phase of life to the next phase of life with this so-called loss of identity? How do you keep going?
Hmm. Shanton, that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. As I've shared in my talk earlier, there are two perspectives one can take to view life. One's a secular view, and the other one is the non-secular or religious view. So if you look from the secular view, all the things that one does is just for the economic benefits. I believe a purpose must be sustainable. It has to be holistic and it has to be relevant before retirement, after retirement, in fact, throughout the stages of life. That purpose should continue to drive that person with a reason for living. So, for the illustrations that you have illustrated, I would say that person has given, I would say, could not free himself, that attached to some material possessions or belonging, power, position, perhaps money, and so forth. That is something which the senior must learn to overcome. Is that
Thanks, Hamid.
your life?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's something, the identity change, it has to be overcome. John, would you have a take on that? How does one transit from a full career to retirement?
Well, I suppose the nice thing about being at this stage is that the past is history, so to speak, and actually, but the future is there for us to create. Okay? And so, if we, I suppose, yeah, for many seniors, they don't have the outlook that there's still a future to work on, to create, right? I mean, many just think that, well, it's time to retire, go slow, prepare for death. But actually, if you look at, for someone in the 60s, the lifespan is in Singapore about mid 80s. So you've actually got 2 decades left, and in a sense, 2 decades left to do a lot of things, right? So there are still many things you could do if you look around, and in looking at your interests and strengths and following up on those, I think you create a new identity for yourself, right? So yes, identity is linked to, well, for guys especially, identity is linked to what we do, right? I suppose my wife is more happy to be a grandmother and so on. So the focus is relationship, but guys, we still look for things to do.
Yes, yes. And I guess your advice that we all need to have a purpose statement past that first or second or third career. We need to have a purpose statement because, as you have rightly pointed out, we still have 10, 20, maybe 30 years of life ahead of us. And as you have
Mhm.
said, the past is history, but the future is still there for us to create and to write. Yeah. I have another question. I was very intrigued by your example of the prisoners, where my take was that the prisoners who were healthier were the ones who had a purpose, a reason to live for even after their incarceration. I like
Okay.
to go on this topic of health. Either John or Hamid, how do you see seniors in the way, how do we have to take care of our health in order that we can then fulfill our purpose in life? And any take on perhaps what you yourself do to encourage our other seniors and families in the room?
Amit, you want to go first or shall I?
I say I've introduced a framework for aging gracefully, and I mentioned there are 4 domains. The first one is purpose, of which is the subject matter of this talk. The second is health. Third is wealth, and the fourth one is relationship. So with health, it is something that we must learn to invest. And we don't talk about investing in health, all right, only when we are about to retire or we are always in the senior years. We must focus on what are called preventive health. That means you should start from young. Try to reduce the risk of having chronic diseases in your senior years. Adopt a healthy lifestyle. Eat the right food, all right, with correct nutrients. Exercise regularly, and always go for health screening at least once a year. That sort of things needs to be done as a sort of routine in order to stay healthy, fit and healthy.
Thanks, Hamid. How about John?
Well, I think what your question raises this idea of health span, right? Lifespan is how long we live, right? But there's this new term that we should, well, maybe not so new, but there's this term that we should also be aware of, uh, and which is health span, the span of our lives when we are relatively healthy without needing the help of others, right? To live. So for our listeners, this idea of how can I increase my health span? That's actually a worthwhile question to explore, right? So part of it is regular exercise. Part of it is, eating proper. So, for example, we know that as we age, we will lose muscle mass and grow over the years. We get weaker and weaker, right? Okay. And if we just say, well, I eat what I've been eating for the last decades, and nothing special, I'm all right. Well, you have a certain degradation in our muscle mass. Okay? But if you read up and you know what they say, well, in order to combat muscle mass, loss of muscle, you should eat more protein, do strength training, and things like that. I think when you're aware and conscious of these, you can. These are little conscious steps to increase your health span.
Mm.
So I've just recently been made aware of the importance of this, and so yours is a very opportune question. I could even pose something interesting to our listeners, and say, well, I'm sure the seniors here now and then you use all this AI software and throw questions at it and see what it says and so on, right? Go in and type in a question saying, I'm how many years old? I am interested in staying healthy. What can I do to increase or lengthen my health span? Right? I threw that question to Gemini and to DeepSeek, and I got fairly interesting answers. So yeah, that's something for our
Yes.
listeners to explore after today.
Yes. Thanks very much for giving us that tip on where else we can find the answers. And you're right. I believe as we age, as we progress in our lives, there will be a condition called sarcopenia, which is muscle mass loss that has to be combated through resistance training. And our diets need to have sufficient protein to also support our bodies and the repair of cells. So thank you very much for those thoughts. On this idea of exercise, I know, Hamid, if you travel a lot, you probably have to walk a lot as well. On this topic of exercise, I would like to link the next question to exercise and loneliness, or maybe having relationships, right? As Hamid says, there must be the R is relationship. May I pose a question to both of you? If I am an introvert and all my life I've been working in the corporate world or in a job where I don't have friends, I have colleagues. But once I leave the corporate world, where can I find friends? How can I make friends? If I'm an introvert, what can I do if I need to get out there and perhaps have a network of friends who either travel with me or do exercise with me? Any thoughts to combat loneliness? Hamid, perhaps start with you.
Well, if you are an introvert, I'm also an introvert. Actually, I am an introvert, all right? But you must take the initiative of connecting with people, interacting with people, increase the social interaction with people, surround yourself with friends, make friends. Now, these are easier than that because if I'm an introvert, how am I going to do it? That's the starting point is difficult. So there is no, I would say, right or wrong answer. All right. These are the kind of people which we, grassroots leaders, look at because we will need to reach out to them and get them involved with our community centers activities. We have to actually encourage them. In other words, if you expect the introvert to take the initiative, it might not work. I think for such people, we have, I would say, a moral duty to help the neighbors, friends, community leaders, to look for people living in loneliness, introvert, always keeping themselves in the room. That's something which I think we have a role to play. Even as seniors, we help each other. I don't really have an answer for how the introverts should we do it. As I said, it's a general question. And just find a way to interact and communicate with the people around you.
Yes, I was I attended an event for seniors recently, and I noticed that even for the introverts who make the effort to attend that event, even if they sit there alone or they stand drinking their coffee alone, there will hopefully be someone who will reach out to them and talk to them and say, hello, there's a chance. So I believe introverts and extroverts, we're all part of the ecosystem. So I agree with you, Hamid. There's no right or wrong way. We just have to make an effort to be out there. Yeah. John, how about you? How would you go about trying to build relationships or get new relationships?
Okay, I suppose when we identify those areas where we hope to contribute, make a contribution to others, we will build some connection, right? So at the heart of your question is this idea of, am I connected with others, right? So yeah, I would say that that is one of the tasks actually that we should set for ourselves in our seniors, to stay connected with others, because we know that as our loved ones and family get older, there'll be deaths and so on. Our social circle can get smaller, and so we need to be aware of it and take steps to stay connected, right? And maybe when I was researching this area, one term stood out for me. You know, when we say, oh, I am lonely or I don't have friends, commonly the idea is I need to find that special someone who can understand me and whom I can chat with anytime I'm lonely, or who understands me, and so on and so on, right? And well, what I discovered was that uh, if you try to find that one person, and even if you are so lucky as to find that one person, wow, the amount of pressure on that one person to meet your emotional needs was going to be terrific, right? So a better solution is this idea of cultivating our personal village, right? Our village is that the connection, the groups that we are connected to, right? So I may have a group that I go for walks with. I may have another group that I go to seashore with, or I may have another group that that I do things with to make my continued contribution to society, right? So as you cultivate different groups, different connections, that helps us to stay connected. That keeps away this feeling of loneliness, and then yeah, we're still connected with the world, just like we were when we were working, except that of course in years past, that connection was required by work. Now it's a bit more optional, you could say. It needs to be a bit more conscious.
Yes, indeed. We need to find small pockets of friends with different interests so that we can switch once in a while, have a variety of relationships and hobbies in our life. Thank you. I have one last question to pose to both of you, and I'd like to go into this topic of intergenerational relationships in our families. Of course, there are many seniors and not so much seniors in our audience tonight. What's your advice on how seniors can communicate better or to engage with the rest of the family better in order that life's purpose becomes clearer? It seems to me that sometimes there is a communication breakdown or a lack of communication totally. What can we do? What can families do to ensure that our seniors continue to thrive and flourish in each family?
I think that's a very relevant question, Shanton. You know, in every family, the seniors are the ones that probably look respectable, all right? In the sense that the younger ones will look to them for guidance, for mentorship, and for, sharing of values and so forth. There's always a my crutch or pie crutch, I don't know what you call it, all right, that gathers. So in my community, or at least in my family life, we have the seniors who actually take the initiative of gathering all the family members and the relatives. For my family, we do so almost every weekend. So that's one way where you can actually help to enhance bonding among the family members, a family of families, or relatives. All right, just mere gathering and talk over a meal or interact over a game and so forth would help to actually promote intergenerational, what you call relationship. All right. Now, one of the things that is very challenging to manage is what we call a generation gap. There is, different generations have different views. So there will likely to be conflict. All right. And so one of the things the seniors could do is actually to educate that everyone has the right to his own opinion, be respectful with the views of others, and agree to disagree, and come up with a compromise. Do not always not to be too highly opinionated. I think we have a role to play as an educator. All right. We educate the young ones. The most important is that we, as seniors, we educate by exemplary conduct. How we conduct ourselves as someone in the senior, because the younger ones, especially the children, will look up to you, whether you are a model or you you do not do what you preach, something like that, and that would be a terrible thing to do.
Thank you for those thoughts. Really, wow, wonderful. Maybe one of the weekends, Hamid, you must reserve for John and I to come and visit you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, most
John,
welcome.
what's your take on how we can help our intergenerational families to flourish with seniors?
Um, okay, I think one of the things I must confess is not so easy is to understand the young people these days, right? So when I interact with even my children, right, they are in the ages of 26 to 38. Um, I can sense that they see things differently. Okay. But okay, they are adult now and they live their lives their way. I have learned to be not to push my views forward too much, lah, right? So I would just say to my peers that uh, if you listen more, you'll probably find them more responsive, right? If we come across as wanting to say things to, like because we have eaten more salt, therefore we have better ideas, and we come across that way, I think they will shy away from us, lah, right? So if we are open and listen, I think there will be occasions when they will acknowledge that we have some more experienced views of the world which they find helpful. Okay?
Yes, that's a
And one
wonderful
of
idea. Yes. So it does also mean that the two generations or three generations have to sit down together to be able to ask, share, and listen without judgment in order that we all can learn what the old view was and what the new view was, and to have a discussion over what could be the best view. Yes, certainly intergenerational conversations have to take place in our families. So that brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you very much, both Hamid and John, for sharing your perspectives on life's purpose in the senior years. And I wish you all the best to continue to flourish and to make positive contributions in your families and societies. Thank you very much. Um,
Thank you for inviting us.
It was our
And thank you
pleasure.
also for those who signed on and spent 1 hour with us.
Yes.
Thank you, Shandon.
Yes. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share an upcoming webinar. Our next webinar is available for you to register on, and this webinar will be held on the 19th of August. It is the week after the National Day week, and the title is Advanced Care Planning: What You Need to Know. Why Grander Together has decided to organize this is because we have encountered some of our seniors who say that when their papas or their mamas are affected by illness, it becomes a very difficult conversation among the adult children as to what needs to be done. But don't worry, this webinar on advanced care planning is not so much about uh, what forms to fill. It's more of how to have that conversation, that intergenerational conversation that is so crucial in making an ACP successful. So the QR code is flashed on screen for a while for you to perhaps just register. And then hopefully you'll be able to join us. So that is on the 19th of August. We do have another webinar after that, and it is entitled Strong Marriages and In-Law Relationships. Again, this webinar title came about because in our past webinar on families and intergenerational relationships, several questions arose about how do I deal with my in-laws? So we've come up with this topic, and we will have a wonderful panel to come to speak to us on strong marriages and in-law relationships. So again, the WhatsApp, uh, the QR code is ready for you to scan and to just put in your initial registration so that you'll be informed by the Zoom platform when the time comes. So thank you very much, everyone. In our last slide, I'd like to request if all of you can continue to connect with Grander together. We are on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Telegram, Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel. I hope you can scan this QR code in the middle of the screen and select which social media platform you'd like to connect with us with to get more news and updates of what is happening within the world of grandparenting and seniors. So it leaves me once again to thank our panelists, Hamid and John, and to thank all of you for spending your evening with us on this wonderful, apparently, webinar. Good night and have a wonderful rest of the week.